Good morning, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for June 16th, 2021, recorded around 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. We have a lot to talk about today, including the potential for a tropical system to impact the Gulf of Mexico states within the next couple of days. So let's go ahead and jump straight into everything. Taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this morning, we noticed that our old invest area, which was 94L, again sitting down here nicely along the intertropical convergence zone. This will bring some rain to the Lesser Antilles and Barbados over the next couple of days, but no threat for development there. Another tropical wave coming off of Africa, no threat for development either from this system. Our main focus today is going to be on invest area 92L, which now has a 90% chance of developing over the next 5 days and a 70% chance within the next 48 hours. Again, this broad area of low pressure has been sitting down here in the Bay of Campeche over the last couple of days, and this is likely now to develop into at least a tropical depression as it moves northward here towards the central and western Gulf Coast. Again, we're mainly really now focusing within the window here for this weekend, late Friday into Saturday, for impacts for parts of Texas and Louisiana, and perhaps even as far east as extreme western Mississippi and maybe even towards Mobile Bay. Again, there's a lot of things that we don't know yet. This is still a very broad system. We'll take a look at that here in a moment. But again, this is the development area. Again, 70% chance over the next 2 days and 90 over the next 5. Again, this is a system that is right now still stuck down here in the Bay of Campeche officially. And again, development chances, I think, will probably be focused more on this area over the next 24 to 36 hours and eventually kind of move northward like that over the next couple of days. And again, we're really now starting to focus anywhere from really about Houston all the way through portions of central and western Louisiana, and maybe even as far east as New Orleans. Again, the impact area is going to be very wide. This is a very broad, sloppy system. If we kind of take a look at that on the visible satellite imagery, we can tell that this is a very broad system. We have thunderstorms and associated convection all the way stretching from the system all the way to near the Florida Peninsula. And because of that, again, this is a very broad system. It's not a tight little system, like we've seen with some of the other, storms that have come out of this area. It's very broad, very sloppy, as we'd expect for June. But again, we have this broad area of shower and thunderstorm activity north of the Yucatan Peninsula. And this is all because, again, we had a tropical wave. And you can kind of see this wave interaction that has occurred. We saw a tropical wave that came across the Lesser Antilles, and that has now kind of worked its way into this region. And this wave has amplified as a result of increasing moisture and background cyclonic vorticity. And at this point now, we see associated shower and thunderstorm activity that is now north of the Yucatan Peninsula and kind of wrapping back into this larger area of low pressure. Again, this is still part of the Central American gyre that's been just sitting down here for the last couple of days because it's been pinned in this region. And I believe that the old vorticity bit moved into Mexico here and has dived into the Eastern Pacific, where we are also watching for development chances in the Eastern Pacific Basin. And we'll get to that here in tomorrow's video. But right now, again, this is a very broad, sloppy system expected to bring impacts to a wide range of areas along the central Gulf Coast here. And if we actually look here, again, you can kind of see that we do have a little bit more of a defined area today of low pressure than we have had in other days. Now, this area is the broad area that we've been talking about, and this has been mainly focused right now. This has been focused over this area, and it's now beginning to lift northward. This larger gyre is now beginning to lift northward. However, what I do think what will end up happening is this area will probably consolidate around this broader gyre and begin to lift northward and kind of rotate around. And we'll talk about that here in the modeling here in a moment. Now, sea surface temperatures across this area are plenty warm for tropical cyclone genesis at this point. Again, water temperatures right now in the Gulf of Mexico as of yesterday are sitting roughly, basically area-wide, sitting 28 to 29 Celsius. You can see here the shelf water sitting roughly near 30 Celsius. The only really cool patch here is off the Florida Panhandle and off the Big Bend region, where water temperatures are 28 Celsius, but they're still plenty warm. Don't get me wrong. You need about 26 Celsius for tropical cyclone genesis to really be a thing. And of course, these water temperatures are fairly warm. Again, so this area is going to be the area for development over the next couple of days, and this area is plenty warm. And if we actually look at this on a different product, this is the upper ocean heat content map updated as of this morning. And what we're really looking at here is, again, you go towards the right of the scale, you're getting in the higher upper ocean heat content values. Basically, tropical cyclones upwell cooler waters. They move over a body, of water like an ocean. They upwell cooler water. If you have high upper ocean heat content, which is what these warmer colors represent, you have a higher degree of probability that the tropical cyclone is going to upwell the warmer water and not choke itself off with cooler water. And what we'll notice is, especially focusing in across the western Gulf of Mexico, we notice that upper ocean heat content values, while not significant like we see out here, they are fairly substantial. And you can see that very nice warm eddy that is popping up right here. And this warm eddy has been there for the last several months. And this is something also to kind of take note of. If you do get a system, later in the year that comes up something like that, or, a system like Katrina did that takes advantage of that, just something to kind of point out. And I do suspect that that area will kind of sit there for the next several months. But again, what we're really looking at here is, again, even some of these, lighter shades of blue and, even some specks of green in there, those do indicate that there is some fairly substantial upper ocean heat content to work with. So I don't think the water temperatures are going to be a limiting factor, as, again, this is the Gulf of Mexico, not necessarily the main development region, but it's still something to kind of keep an eye on. And again, as this kind of traverses this area, it will have sufficient upper ocean heat content and water temperatures to work with there. Now, taking a look at the model forecast, this is the 60 run of the GFS, valid for 8 a.m. today, 12Z today. And again, we'll kind of move this forward in time. And again, what we end up noticing is that we have this area of cyclonic vorticity that gets stretched northward. And again, we can kind of run that back. That kind of develops out of the Yucatan Peninsula from this tropical wave and begins to rotate northward. And around that same time, we're getting another genesis here in the Eastern Pacific Basin. And that's also going to be something to kind of keep in mind here. But again, this area of low pressure tries to consolidate as it approaches the coastline. And we do get a very broad, sloppy system somewhere along the central Louisiana, maybe even far eastern Texas coastline there. Now, if we kind of run this forward again, what ends up happening, this tropical wave that we've been monitoring over the last couple of days that really started all the way back here, you can kind of barely see this tropical wave outlined in here. It moved all the way out, and this is about just another 12 hours in time by 2 p.m. today. And what you'll see is that you get the genesis right off of there, and it rotates around this larger cyclonic flow. Again, we still have a cyclonic vorticity flow that is in this environment. And if we actually look here at the GFS forecasted soundings over a wider area, you can actually see that, again, we have a lot of shear that is still around in this environment. We still have about 15 knots of shear, and we do have some dry air, especially in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. And that's going to be the one thing that will be hindering development chances. If we look here at the relative humidity in the middle part of the atmosphere, what you'll notice is that we have a large branch of energy that is coming from the Eastern Pacific and being funneled all the way now into the North Atlantic waters. But again, we have this very broad area, and this will bring impacts again to a wide area. But notice that we have this dry air that is going to be funneled in because we have northerly flow and cold air, or not really cold air advection, but stable air advection. And that will likely be why we don't get a very consolidated system on the GFS. Again, we can kind of see here that in the model forecast, we have a lot of dry air that's going to be funneled into this. And this honestly looks more like a subtropical system than it does purely tropical. And if we take a look here again at the vortex average soundings for this environment, what we'll notice is that the wind shear is still sitting about 15 knots. Again, you have southerly flow at the surface, and then that rapidly changes to westernly flow aloft. And because of that, again, you can't have these two competing flows in the atmosphere. It has to be one uniform column throughout the entire profile. And because of that, because of the fact that we have some fairly dry air aloft, I mean, this is, dry air that is going to be easily transported down to the surface. And because of that, it is likely that thunderstorms that go up in this environment will produce more of a dry air and downburst environment than it will help, to saturate the environment and cause additional thunderstorms and upscale growth. And because of that, we can also see that we will have some fairly strong vertical wind shear. If we look here at the 200 millibar winds on the GFS forecast, what we'll notice is that we end up having this high shear environment that kind of just stretches over. This is the initial system that ends up developing at this time. This is kind of the initial system that really pops out of the Yucatan. And then eventually, what we can actually notice is that it does try to develop somewhat of an upper level anticyclone here, but we have some fairly strong upper level winds that are still cutting across this area. Just off the screen, we have an upper level low that is just now departing here. And this upper level low is kind of imparting some of that southwesterly vertical wind shear into the system. And because of that, you can see that it's kind of transporting all of this moisture and better precipitation to the east of the system. So because of that, it is more likely that this will be an easternly weighted system. And you can kind of see, if we just jump back to the relative humidity product, we can see that, again, we have a lot of this on the eastern side here. And because we have that southerly flow here, what this is going to do is that this will create a fairly strong onshore flow. If we kind of go back to this, that's a lot of southerly flow here, and that's, definitely kind of moving, northward. And what that's going to do is you've got all that moisture coming up, so you definitely have a flooding problem here. And you could have some storm surge problems, even though this will be probably a weaker system. Again, all that flow that is coming in off the Gulf of Mexico and just shoving into a very storm surge prone area will create maybe even just a foot of inundation, 1 to 3 feet of inundation above normally dry ground. But that is a problem. Again, 1 to 3 feet. I mean, that is a problem. I mean, it can definitely be a problem for vehicles, and, and it's difficult to kind of walk through. So, just to kind of understand that, yes, there is going to be potential impacts, even if this is not necessarily a 50, 60 mile per hour tropical storm, it doesn't have to be to provide substantial impacts. And what we'll notice is that, again, if we continue to look at the vertical wind shear throughout the time, we end up getting a new center reformation. And at this time, we have a very strong upper level low that is now sitting across here, right across there, Mexico. And that is imparting even more vertical wind shear on the system. And at that point, it looks like that development and the potential for intensification will be limited. And you can really see that that kind of just gets strung out in an area of vorticity. Now, we will have to watch maybe for development chances later out of the system in the Northern Gulf, or not in the Northern Gulf, but in the Northern Atlantic, and we'll just have to kind of look at that later down the road. Now, the 0Z European model, again, much of the same thing. It does try to have these two competing areas of vorticity, and one of the things with that is that this is actually a very less favorable chance for intensification, and mainly more of a rainmaker threat. Again, with the potential for two competing areas of vorticity, again, you can have these things where it kind of disrupts the moisture flux response, and it can also disrupt the potential for thunderstorms to develop around a consolidated area. And because of that, I think these two areas are going to be competing to the point where it's going to be just a broader, unorganized system. I don't expect to see anything really more than 40, 45, maybe 50 miles per hour at the max. But again, even that over saturated environments, that can knock down a couple of trees, etc. And if you get those trees to knock down power lines, whatever, you could end up having a pretty big issue on your hands within a very short amount of time. So again, the rainfall is going to be the primary concern here. GFS ensembles, again, this is the ensemble mean sea level pressure, and what we're really looking for, all these little red numbers indicate where a storm could be. And again, this is by 12Z Friday. We have a wide range of possibilities from a storm that is entering into the northern Gulf here, closer to New Orleans, to a storm that is still sitting down here in the southern Gulf of Mexico. And there's just a wide range of possibilities, even at this lead time, where usually we'd have pretty good consolidation on what's going on, pretty good understanding of what's going on. But because this is a very broad, disorganized system, the models are having a very tough time. So it's going to take maybe even another day before we actually understand what's going on, before we can get a better initialization on these models. And you can see here, even by 12Z Saturday, this is by 8 a.m. Saturday morning, on July 19th, again, we could be dealing with, something that, is either already inland over Alabama or still over the western Gulf of Mexico at this time. And again, any more time over water isn't really going to matter given the fact that we're going to have increasing vertical wind shear after that time. And it looks like that it honestly would just tear the system apart even further. So the best chance really is going to be if you get a storm that develops quicker and moves quicker, then it has the potential to be a little bit stronger given the fact that, it's not going to be competing with extreme vertical wind shear like we'll be seeing entering the Gulf of Mexico later in the week. Now, taking a look here at the 200 millibar wind again on the GFS ensembles. Again, we do end up getting a more favorable pattern that exists after about 60 hours from now. But we notice that what we have is that this upper level disturbance is creating a lot of vertical wind shear around the periphery of this. And because of that, you're going to be getting some pretty strong shear that is being imparted on the system. And if we look here at the precipitable water anomalies, we'll notice that, again, we have a fairly strong signal for just a big slug of tropical moisture to be advected northward and into the central Gulf of Mexico, central and eastern Gulf of Mexico, really. And you can see that tropical moisture is just going to be slugged around for the next while. And this is by Sunday, Monday. We're going to have a lot of this tropical moisture, even all the way funneling down into Florida over the next couple of days. Real quickly, just a look at the European ensembles, just to give you an understanding of what could happen. Again, the system develops generally off the Yucatan Peninsula. Again, I don't really suspect that we'll be seeing a system that ends up developing down here. I think our system's going to develop up here. And this, again, is coming from that broad area of disturbance that is located right in this area right here. So the European ensembles, again, continue to give that indication that, yes, we will likely have impacts to somewhere along the Louisiana coastline here. Now, it's not possible that, it's not impossible, rather, that extreme western Mississippi ends up getting landfall point here. It's not impossible, but it looks like the consolidated track locations have kind of focused on somewhere along the Louisiana coastline, anywhere from about Lake Charles through the New Orleans area. This kind of gives a wide range of possibilities here, but this is pretty much what the model is indicating. Now, we can see that there is some models here. If we kind of take off these tracks real quickly, we can see that there is some models here that do have a stronger system in this area. We can see that we have some that are sub 1,000 millibars at this time, and we can kind of zoom in here to kind of like look at everything. We have some that are more intense than others. Some 991s in there. Most of them, though, are in the low 1,000 range. So not really expecting a very intense storm at this time, and certainly not something that is going to be significant. But we'll be watching. Again, this is going to be a significant rainmaker. Rainfall amounts could exceed over 6 inches in spots, with isolated amounts over 10 inches. So certainly something to pay attention, and this is a threat, just not necessarily in the form of wind. But we'll have to see how everything plays out. And again, I do believe that we will have a tropical storm or depression in this area sometime by tomorrow, honestly. All right. Well, that being said, hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley. I'll talk to you guys again some more tomorrow.